Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokemon community, discovering the 6 Pokemon on their dream team along the way. I'm Charlie Merriman, merry by name, merry by nature, otherwise known as Chazingdra, a host and commentator for the Pokemon Video Game Championship Series, and a content creator. And this week, as every week, I very much hope that my guest and I can brighten your day, because I have the pleasure of being joined by Taran Birdee. Taran, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good, yeah, thanks so much for asking. Doing very well, thank you. I'm very excited to have you here today. So, Taran, for anyone who's not so familiar with you, can you give a brief introduction to yourself?
Hi, I'm Taran. I'm 26, and yeah, I play Pokemon, the Pokemon video game. I've been playing since roughly 2018, and I've qualified for Worlds a few times. A couple of my proudest accomplishments. I'm the I won a regional in Perth in 2023. And yes, I had a few other top cuts. I've top cut NAIC as well a few years ago.
Incredible. And yes, of course, Taran and I know each other through the UK competitive video game community. And I'm very excited to take a little bit of a deeper dive into your life story, Taran, and the 6 Pokemon on your dream team. And of course, you are quite recently coming off the back of a very good finish at the North American International Championships this year in 2024. Looking forward to talking to you more about that. But before we go all the way to there, let's go right back to the start. And I believe what we're starting with is you playing video games and Pokemon from a young age.
Yeah, so I think I've always enjoyed playing video games as long as I can remember. Even back on the Game Boy, and I think it was in 2005 when I got my first Pokemon game, Pokemon Emeralds. And I can't quite tell you what it was that stuck out to me and why it stuck with me for so long. I just kept going back and playing it again. Yeah, I feel like just in general, role-playing games was something that I really enjoyed, and yeah, Pokemon was the one that stuck with me the longest. Here we are, almost 20 years later, still playing it. So yeah, I think just in general, it's a large part of who I am. Even when I'm not playing Pokemon now, I still enjoy playing video games, be it on my Switch, or my brother's got a PlayStation 5 that I play on sometimes. And so that's really how I guess I started getting into Pokemon. Is just it was one of the video games I had, and it's the one that stuck with me the longest. And yeah, I never really stopped. I know a lot of my friends who I talk to nowadays, they say, "Oh, Pokemon, I played that when I was younger." Or some of them say, "I'm playing it now, in Gens 8 and 9. I played it back in Gen 2 and 3, and then I took a big break, and I have a Switch now." And yeah, I just never had that. I just kept chugging along all the way through, and yeah, that's how we're here, I guess. The game that I never stopped playing.
Yeah, fair enough. Emerald was your first Pokemon game. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. So, did you also spend quite a lot of time in the Battle Factory on Emerald?
So I think in the Battle Factory, that was the only one I could play because it gave you the Pokemon. I really enjoyed the Battle Frontier, but I was never any good at any of the other ones because I was so young. I could barely get past the Elite Four, and I didn't know anything about training your Pokemon properly or how to make a good team. So the Battle Factory at least gave me Pokemon that I could use that was strong. I liked the level 100 version of it because I never had a Pokemon that was level 100. I never had the patience of getting there. And actually, I never fully completed the Battle Frontier until 2022, when just before Worlds that year, I decided, right, I'm going to put a lot of focus into playing Pokemon Emerald, training Pokemon, and really trying to get all of the gold symbols. And I finally did. Took me about 4 months and a countless amount of hours, but yes, I was able to do it, and I was like, this is a real accomplishment for me. It felt like I'd finally completed Pokemon Emeralds.
Yeah, exactly. Well done. That is no mean feat. I'm not surprised it took 4 months. And if anyone's unfamiliar, the Battle Frontier in Pokemon Emerald is quite a few different kinds of mini games almost, where your battling prowess and other things are put to the test. And to acquire all the gold symbols there, you've got to jump through quite a few hoops. So congratulations to you there, Taran.
Yes.
Can you recall any specific difficult moments when you were trying to get through that?
I think there was one that really sticks out to me. I think it was the Battle Palace. So in that you put your free Pokemon into battle, but you don't get to choose what they do. The moves they make is based on their nature. So natures that are typically quite good, like Modest Nature, which boosts special attack. So good for special attackers, but actually it makes Pokemon use defensive moves a lot more often. And I remember for a gold symbol, I think you need to win 42 battles in a row. And I remember getting to the 41st battle, and I got a little unlucky in the first, with the first Pokemon that was out. And then I just remember a Blissey coming out on the opponent's team. And I couldn't beat it at all, but it couldn't beat me either. So I was sat there for about, half an hour, just sat there waiting for the moves to go through. I ran out of PP on all of my Pokemon, and it was a Milotic that I had that just couldn't knock out this Blissey. And then I see a Typhlosion as the third Pokemon. When the Blissey finally runs out of PP as well and struggles itself to being knocked out, a Typhlosion comes out, and I obviously lose to it, and I was just heartbroken, knowing that I had to go through it all again. That one was a really tough moment.
Okay, well, in order to get you through that tough moment, I think it's time to introduce your first Pokemon buddy on your dream team. So the way this works is that Taran is not aiming to build the most competitively viable team here. It's just Pokemon that are the most special to Taran in some way, and Taran's decided on these in advance. I have no idea what they are. So Taran, hit us. What's the first Pokemon on your dream team?
So starting off relatively simple, I feel like you might be able to see why it's one of my favorite Pokemon. Rayquaza. As you can tell, my online name is Rayquaza. It's from the Pokemon Emeralds, probably Gen 3 nostalgia, but I just think it is one of the coolest looking Pokemon ever made. And it really sticks with me as like that Pokemon that was super strong in the games when I was a kid. The Pokemon that I always wanted to catch because I knew that I could just beat anyone in the game with it. And I still think to this day it's one of the best looking Pokemon ever made. I think it helps that green's one of my favorite colors, and it is quite green. And that's kind of where my username came from as well. It's one of my friends told me, if you need a username, just put some of your favorite Pokemon together and mash it together into a name. And Rayquaza was by far my favorite Pokemon at the time. So I was like, this is a cool Pokemon. I want it as my name, and here we are.
Yeah, fair enough. And I subscribe to that philosophy as well, with my favorite Pokemon, Kingdra, making a cameo.
Yes,
in my
making it into your name,
online name. But do you think that green is one of your favorite colors partly because of Rayquaza and Pokemon Emerald?
I think it could be. That's a great point, actually. I feel like there are definitely things in my life where I like them because they're green, but there are also things that because they might not be something I normally like, but because they are green, I end up liking them. But I think it works both ways actually now. So it's something to think about actually. But yes, I'm glad it is green because I think it looks great on Rayquaza.
Chicken and egg situation there.
Yeah,
I remember in Ruby and Sapphire, I think Emerald works a bit differently, but when there are rocks that just clear later on in the game that you can then go and access where you find Rayquaza.
Oh yeah,
and that was such a. I remember finding that when I was younger, thinking, "Oh, what? This is new. Why have I not seen it before?" And it's such an exciting moment. It makes a lot of sense for it to be the first member of your dream team. And I stopped myself asking just before, what your favorite first partner Pokemon from Pokemon Emerald was, because I thought it might be the first member of your team, but since it's not, what was it?
Because, as I mentioned, I've played through Pokemon Emerald so many times, and I've used all of the starter Pokemon. I feel like I've probably used Trico the most, because I think its final evolution Sceptile is one of all. Maybe because it's green as well. Who knows?
Exactly.
But I think it just looks the coolest in those games. But without wanting to put too many spoilers, one of the starters is also on my dream team.
Okay.
Because it made it into my list. So yeah.
Well, we'll leave it there. And subconsciously,
yeah.
I've also worn a green shirt for tonight. So
I did notice that. Oh, I also noticed the poster you've got in the background there.
Oh, yeah.
Nice green as well.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
My camera's mirrored, so there we go. Excellent. Okay, so we'll segue from all of that verdure into what we're going to talk about next from your life, which is appropriately getting into competitive Pokemon.
I think I have a very vivid memory in my life of where I started getting into competitive Pokemon. First of all, I guess I should say that one of my best, possibly worst traits, I think it's up for interpretation, is just I am deeply competitive about most things. Put a game in front of me, and at some point in my life, I will try and I will spend so much time on it that I will try and get really good at it. I think some other examples, like Scrabble. I enjoy playing Scrabble and like word games in general, and I enjoy doing crosswords. Scrabble was something where I would spend time reading the Scrabble dictionary to memorize words because I wanted to be really good at Scrabble. Even other video games, it's the same thing. Yeah, I will. If I even get slightly hooked on it, suddenly I'm looking at the competitive side of things and really wanting to do it. So I guess when I was younger, because that kind of wasn't, open to me, given it was so much harder to like connect with other people over the internet and such. I would play with one of my best friends, Ringo, who I met in primary school and I've known for, well, similarly close to 20 years now. And we just had such similar interests, and still do. And I remember one time he came round to my house. It was during Black and White. I'd anticipated that we would battle, and I'd prepared a team of the 3 starters, all level 100s, the 2, Reshiram and Zekrom, both level 100, and then a Zoroark as well, just level 100s. I was like, this is a great team. And then he leads with a Volcarona, and he quiver dances once, and that's it. My whole team is getting knocked out, left and right. No, I can't do anything against it. And I'm just like, how in the world has this happened? I have 6 Pokemon. What is going on? And he says, EV training. And suddenly I'm just like, oh, what is that? And from that moment, that was it. I was hooked. I was completely, I was never going to lose like that again, that's for sure. So VGC was always on my radar, but never something I seriously put any thought into until I was at uni and I had a bit more spare time. And I found out that there were tournaments held in the Excel Centre. So I was like, okay, that's, 30 minutes from home. Maybe I'll just make a weekend out of it, go over and see what's going on. And that was another step. I was just absolutely hooked once I got there. The tournament was fine. I'd also known people online who I knew were going to be at the event and helped introduce me around to people so that I wasn't just on my own. And at that point, I never stopped. I found that there were events local events in London. I went to those and I just kept playing, and well, here we are now. I've not looked back since. I think that was probably one of the best decisions in my life to go to that tournament, because just taking me down a whole different path I never would have believed was possible.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the sorts of doors that Pokemon can open up. And going right back to the start there, Scrabble, if anyone's unfamiliar, you form words on a board, and that's the premise of it. The fact that you're reading the Scrabble dictionary, that's fascinating. Can you remember any particularly good Scrabble words that come out at you from that time?
So this is going to seem really silly, but ZA, ZA. I couldn't tell you what it means. I have no idea. But I saw the words and I was like, I couldn't even figure out why it was a word in the first place. And now it's part of the Scrabble toolkit to say, if you ever get hit with a Z on your rack because you get 7 letters, you know that if there's an A somewhere down, you can just play it and get rid of the Z because it's one of the hardest letters to play. But that is a word that sticks with me.
I'm sure your opponents must have been infuriated when you were making.
Oh, they were probably doing it themselves as well. Yeah, my family were infuriated. Yeah, but if I play against other people, they're doing it before I am.
Yeah. Perhaps also foretelling the new Pokemon game that we've got coming out, Pokemon Legends ZA, but a different kind of ZA.
Oh, true.
Now, and also if anyone's unfamiliar with EV training, it's getting boosts to specific stats of your choosing in order to build a Pokemon in the best way for you. For example, if you want a more offensive Pokemon, then you'll try and get those boosts to your attack or special attack stats, for example. Yeah. And so, clearly going a long way that this Volcarona was able to sweep through your team of legendaries plus Zoroark. Wow, fascinating. And then, I think you take that first step into live events and suddenly a sort of whole new world opens,
absolutely
Wizard of Oz moment almost. I think it's the meeting people who share this passion. It's just sort of it all snowballs from there, because suddenly you and something that comes up time and time again is it's working with people that helps you improve the fastest and best at this game. So
I think definitely one of the biggest things for me was that being in a big venue where you know that despite any differences you might have, every single person in that venue likes Pokemon. Otherwise they wouldn't be there. And so having that, especially because as a late-ish 20-year-old person, there aren't many people that share the same interests with me outside of these tournaments, but knowing that when I go to these tournaments, I now have 1,000 people that share the same interests as me. It makes it easy to talk to people there. And I definitely think that it's been a huge part of, I was quite shy when I was younger. And I'm still, not the most outgoing person, but going to Pokemon events and being able to talk to anyone about Pokemon has definitely made that so much easier, and definitely changed me as a person, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's all about finding your people, isn't it? And I remember meeting you for the first time at my first Pokemon event in Lille 2022.
Yeah.
And of course I'd heard your name as a player of such standing, and it was such a strange sort of collision of worlds moment to meet you there. But exactly that, I think anyone there is kind of, you just have that confidence that you have common ground with people.
Yeah.
And so it's great to hear that Pokemon was something that helped you in that regard. And now it's time for you to help us with the second Pokemon on your dream team. So who's going to join Rayquaza?
Okay, so this one kind of coming similarly, from the competitive side of things. Aaron, another Gen 3 Pokemon. You might be noticing a little bit of a theme here. Aaron is a strange one. It's something that, when I was younger, wasn't really one of my favorite Pokemon. It was just another Pokemon I used. I always thought Aggron was quite cool, but Aaron was just a step on the way to get an Aggron. And how on most online forums you have, profile pictures, and something you may have noticed seeing some of my social media profiles, I don't really have profile pictures on Discord, on X, and on this particular forum, the default profile picture was just a sprite of a Pokemon, and mine was Aaron, and I stuck with it, and for years now. I think 12 years-ish. And it's grown into one of my favorite Pokemon, I think, because of it being my profile picture for so long. And now I absolutely love it.
So what you're saying is this online forum randomly assigned you an Aaron picture?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
see.
I think yeah, I wonder if it had assigned me something else, maybe that would have been my favorite Pokemon.
Yeah.
There was actually a funny moment where the forum kind of had a bit of a refresh, and it changed my default picture to a Blissey. And I was at this point, I was like, no, we can't be having that. So I went and found a sprite online of Aaron, the same one I had, and made it my profile picture again. So it looked like a default one, but it wasn't default.
It's your own little dose of satisfaction saying you thought it was a default profile picture, but no,
Exactly.
I chose it. I wonder if it updated again, if it would have given you a Pokemon beginning with C, because you had A, B, C, that Aaron, Blissey, and then.
Oh yeah. I wonder what Pokemon.
So, yeah, is what you're saying did you just say Aaron is your favorite Pokemon, or just one of them?
Just one of.
One of. Okay. Right.
I think we're going to get to my favorite Pokemon is saved for last.
Yes, fair enough. Good.
But yes, the 6 Pokemon I have are my top 6, and so Aaron sits firmly in there.
Great, fantastic. And have you ever used Aggron, its fully evolved form, competitively?
Oh, I don't think so. No, unfortunately, I've never quite found a use for it. I think, Mega Aggron in particular, back in 2018, I remember seeing some teams with it that were really cool, but I was much more interested in Aaron itself, and particularly, back in Generation 5, you could get away with some, niche little strategies with, setting up Sand and then using Endeavor with Aaron to a level 1 Aaron, so that you would take a hit, Endeavor a Pokemon down to 1 HP, and then Sandstorm Chip would knock the last 1 HP remaining, so you could beat level 100 Pokemon with a level 1 Aaron, and that was always really cool. But I've never taken it to a event, unfortunately.
Yeah, Endeavor, of course, brings your opponent's Pokemon down to the same level of HP as the Pokemon using Endeavor. But that's great. I would love one day to see you bring Aaron to a tournament. But for now, we've got Rayquaza and Aaron on your dream team so far. But we're going on from there to important decisions that you are making post-university and job searching.
It's this kind of time. So this would have been July 2019 when I graduated from undergraduate until the end of that year. So it started 2020. And I just graduated. I'd studied maths at Warwick University. So I hadn't done quite as well as I'd hoped. And it meant that some of the more classic finance jobs required a grade higher than I had. So they weren't options for me. So I spent about, this 6 months trying to find a job, not having much success. But it came to about December of 2019, and I had a job offer for a small, firm that was working on some travel software. And at this point, I was kind of like, I could take it. I could just take it and say, I've got a job now. That's it. I'm, happy with that. There was also another option for me where I had, another analyst kind of role that the application was in the works for, but it was going to take it quite a while. I was right at the start of the process. And in that time, I had been accepted for a master's degree to study data science, which would take a year, starting in January of that year, actually. So my decision was, do I go to, do I just accept this job that I've got, the guaranteed role, or do I, kind of take a bit of a risk, put myself in another £8,000 worth of debt to study for a year and kind of hold out on this other role that I thought might be better suited to me, but obviously runs the risk of not panning out, and then I finish a master's degree having to look for a job again. I was really umming and ahhing about the decision, but the moment that really stuck out to me was when I'd got the job offer from this firm that had offered me a job, and the kind of, I don't say CEO, but the leader of the firm, I guess, had come to speak to me. It wasn't a big one. It was maybe 20 odd people. And I had a chat with him, and he asked me, why do you want to work here? And I couldn't really answer him. I could answer him in saying, the standard spiel of, oh yeah, I think your firm is really good. I think the job is suited to me, etc. And he said, no, I've heard all of that before. What I want to know is, in 2 years, are you going to go off somewhere and, leave us, or are you going to stick around for the long term? I guess I couldn't really give him a straight answer on it. And he was like, you can take this role. We think you're very qualified for it. But am I just going to be investing money in someone who's going to leave in a year or two? It was at that point that I kind of realized, actually, I don't want this job as much as I want to hold out on this other role and go and study for a year. And it really, I guess, taught me that you have to really, I guess, make the decisions in your life that you're not going to regret. Even if at the time they feel like the most attractive ones. I have come to realize I'd much rather take a risk on something and it not pan out but not regret it than I would, settle for what I've got, knowing that there's something potentially better out there. And as it happens, it all worked out just fine. I got the role, I finished studying, and I've been there 3.5 years now. It's worked out perfectly. I think it also kind of factors into my Pokemon as well. When I'm making decisions in games and it's a tricky decision, I always think I would feel really bad after the battle if I made this choice and didn't go with my gut and then lost because of it. So you might see me on my stream games making quite a few risks and playing very aggressively because I just make the decisions that I know I won't regret at the end of it. Even if they don't pan out, at least I can, finish with my head held high and be like, I played to what I thought was the best of my ability. And thankfully, for the most part, I'm right. But it does go wrong sometimes, and at least I don't feel so bad about it.
It's really wise advice, and yeah, I was going to say it makes a lot of sense for your Pokemon playing as well. In your eyes, how important is that mental aspect of it?
I think going to tournaments, kind of going between rounds, up until, the season that's coming up, we've played, 9 rounds days on day one, going into, if you want to win a tournament, 8 rounds on the second day, but at least 5 or 6. And they're long days and long and hard days. And if you can't keep yourself in great mental shape between those rounds, if you let the small things get to you, suddenly you may not play your best in one round, you lose that, and then you're right in the thick of things playing for your tournament life at that point. So it's really just about minimizing the external factors, and knowing that the game we play is kind of luck based in a sense, but you can do as much as you can to manage it, and also that there will be games where you're required to make real predictions, and sometimes you might just have to guess what your opponent's going to do. And that's why I always say I make plays that I won't regret, because I know that it won't stick with me going into future rounds. Whereas if I kind of make a decision that doesn't go my way, but I knew in my gut that they were going to do something else, that would stick with me, and I would be like, if I just made that play like I thought, then I would have won and I wouldn't be in this position now. So I guess it's just one of many factors that I always say is like trying to reduce the negative mental game you have going into rounds and between rounds. I have like very strict routines for tournament days of drinking a lot of water, and if I lose sets, I will turn off my phone completely, go outside for 5 minutes, get all of the internal anger that I have because I hate losing out, and then come back in and mentally reset, happy to talk to people at that point. And it's really helped, actually. I find that for the most part, I'm able to play my best throughout long days, just by having that strict, mental regime, I guess, between rounds.
That's really wise advice, and I think also speaks to just letting yourself feel those things. It's not like you can stop yourself from feeling frustrated. But knowing there's a time and a place for it, I guess, just venting at a time when you can and then refocus.
I've always said that I personally believe that everyone who goes to a tournament, regardless of why they're there, I am a firm believer that anyone who's playing in tournaments doesn't like losing. Otherwise, they simply, they wouldn't have the competitive kind of mindset to be playing at these tournaments. Even if, that comes out clear in some people like losing less than others. I, for one, really, really hate losing. But yes, I always say that no one likes losing. And so it's okay to be annoyed at yourself, at the game, at anything for losing, or just generally be annoyed that you've lost. But not taking that out on other people and not letting it affect your day and the future rounds is the most important thing. Let it all out, go past it, and then come back refreshed and go again.
I hope that everyone listening and watching is taking heed of that, because absolutely crucial advice there. On these marathon days, as you say, they are such long days in Pokemon competitions, so very important to keep as much focus as we can. And now it's time that we shift our focus back to the third Pokemon on your dream team. So who's going to join Rayquaza and Aaron? And I'm loving this little parade of plushies that you've got going.
Yeah. By the way. So the next one we've got is Marshadow. Back in Sun and Moon, when it was kind of such a strong Pokemon, I think there's just something about it. I don't know. I think it looks really cute. As with a couple of my Pokemon on the list, Rayquaza included. I just really like the way it looks. I think it's really strong. Yes, I love using it whenever I can. I remember one format at the end of Sword and Shield, Series 13, where you could use any Pokemon you wanted, including mythical Pokemon, which are slightly harder to come by and have never been allowed in video game formats. And Marshadow was the first Pokemon on my team. Just been, I have to make this work because I love it.
What was it about how Marshadow works that you loved?
I think it's just that it's one of those really fast and really strong attackers, kind of the prototypical Pokemon that I love to use. Something that hits hard, hits fast, has great offensive coverage, and has something unique about it as well, I guess, in its Spectral Thief move, which can steal boosts of an opposing Pokemon, and it's got a great typing. I think just everything about it is so good.
Ghost Fighting, a very rare typing combination. And we've moved beyond Generation 3. Interesting. Well, we'll see if that keeps up. But we're going from there into your experience of the pandemic.
The pandemic started in, roughly around 2020. That's when the first lockdown happened in the UK. And I was studying my master's degree at the time. So I did a term up in Coventry and then came home and spent the rest of the year there. It was quite a strange time because Pokemon events were cancelled as well. So basically we moved completely to online play. And I found, typically as you do while you're studying, that you have a bit more free time than you normally would, as opposed to having a job. I kind of took it as a motivation to really push on and really try my best to improve, especially because just before the pandemic, I'd come off my first regional top cut in Bochum in Sword and Shield, and I thought, okay, something must have gone right there. I don't want to let this settle. I want to keep playing, and I would play online tournaments every single weekend. I loved doing it. I loved being on calls with my friends, talking about the game, and then going into these tournaments and playing. And I had so much fun doing it, and I really feel like it helped me a lot coming out of the pandemic. And I think the player I was before and after the pandemic are worlds apart. And it was really that time that I feel like I had almost to catch up to the rest of the pack. And I'm glad it showed once the pandemic finished. I think I also learned a lot from that time as well about, I guess, the person I want to be. And I think just in general, while we didn't get to go outside very much, I was able to learn a lot from it.
People talk about, doing a lot of traveling to try and find yourself, but there's also something to be said, I think, about just being in the same space for a very long time for finding yourself as well. It's great that you kept up that motivation. You used the pandemic, something you could take a positive out of in really trying to hone your Pokemon playing over that time.
Yeah.
For most of this year-long Masters, you were actually studying from home.
Yes. One of the reasons I'd wanted to do a Masters in the first place was kind of because I wasn't totally satisfied with how my undergraduate degree had gone, and I wanted to kind of prove to myself, that competitive kind of mindset coming back, that if I really put the effort in, I could study to a high level. And I really put a lot of time into that, and having at this point 16 to 18 hours a day just in my room, being able to focus on my studying at points, Pokemon at points, really helped actually. And I think once again, my degree was another thing that I was really proud of once I'd finished it and came out of the other end.
So that master's degree, you implied it there, but that master's degree, you were more pleased with your result than for your undergraduate degree?
Much more.
Great.
And so, yes, I think overall, that decision that I had, just before the pandemic, it really justified to me that I also wanted to, I guess, make sure that I'd made the right decision. And part of that was making sure I did well in my master's degree. And so that was also, I think, another motivation was, okay, as I say, I'm putting myself in another £8,000 of debt. I want to make sure it's worth it.
It sounds like you utilized that decision to the best of its ability, and the entire world really sort of found themselves necessarily spending a lot more time online on their computer than they would ordinarily during the pandemic. So I think that's totally natural. But from there, let's now go into what the fourth Pokemon will be on your dream team. So who's going to join Rayquaza and Aaron and Marshadow?
Okay, so next one is Togekiss. And Togekiss is it's a strange one for me. It's one of my favorite Pokemon because I think it looks really cool actually, and it was actually the first Pokemon I ever shiny hunted. So when I was younger in Pokemon Emerald, while I was still very naive, I remember seeing a purple Wailmer, thinking that's a strange color, and I knocked it out. And I look back on it and I'm thinking, I should have caught it. I then remember in Pokemon Pearl, I got very lucky and found a shiny Starly just out of nowhere. I made sure to catch this one. And then I started to think, okay, I really want to start shiny hunting Pokemon. And so I really put a lot of time into learning about it in Pokemon Pearl, and Togepi going into Togekiss was the Pokemon I decided on. Its shiny form is it's a bit hard to tell, but I really liked how it looked, and that's why it's, I guess, on my team. I think I was really, really pleased in Sword and Shields that it was actually extremely good. It meant I got to use one of my favorite Pokemon, and actually I was able to find my shiny one from Pokemon Pearl and use it in Sword and Shield in a couple of tournaments. So I was very happy with that.
It's fantastic that we have that capability of transferring Pokemon all the way up to the present day. It's so cool. This really defines the nature of a buddy Pokemon who's there for you through it all. Well, I wonder if you had caught that purple Wailmer, if now that would be a Pokemon that would make your dream team. I mean, who knows? There are
possibly,
yeah. Maybe it will, but
possibly if I'd known, then I can assure you it's not a part of my dream team. Not after I knocked out that purple one. It was never. Yeah. Now I look at it and grimace.
Yeah. It's Yeah, I think because you said you started with Generation 3 as well. So in Generation 2, of course, everyone encounters the shiny red Gyarados in Alola
Yes,
Rage.
yeah.
So I guess having not played through that yourself, it would have landed just very strangely with you. Not entirely sure what it was.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
amazing that you had then the luck to find a random shiny Starly in Pokemon
Yeah.
Pearl as well. It's incredible. I actually never knew this about you. I never knew that you also do a bit of shiny hunting.
I
But
do occasionally. I must say I don't have very much patience, so only when I'm really desperate for a shiny Pokemon will I go and hunt it.
yeah,
And yes, Togekiss was the first one that I really tried.
yeah. And as you say, shiny Togepi, shiny Togekiss, fairly similar forms, but a subtle shiny sometimes just it's got an elegance about it. I guess
Oh, absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. I love that there's a diverse range of the shinies that are more out there and the shinies that are more subtle. But okay, fascinating. So Togekiss swooping onto your team, and now we're going to swoop over to your 2022 season.
Yes, so this was, just coming out of really the tail end of the pandemic as we knew it back then. Events were coming back, and I remember the first one in Europe was in Liverpool, so in the UK, and I I didn't feel like there was any pressure on me, but I wanted myself to show to myself at least that the effort I'd put in during the pandemic had actually paid off. I had been able to qualify for the World Championships, which we knew was going to be held in London that year, actually. So I'd already qualified before the pandemic, and so I just wanted to really give a good account of myself, and put all of that training to use. And I remember clearly it was a double restricted format, so you're allowed to use two legendary Pokemon. And I was really struggling for a team until a few days before the event, which may become a little bit of a theme as we go on. Um, and then I saw a team from a Japanese player. Something that really helped me out was that during the pandemic, I was able to get in touch with a lot of Japanese players and start to use a lot of Japanese teams. And I was really able to find out the kind of team that I liked using, and very quickly be able to like sift through a lot of teams and say this one is just not for me. Oh, this one might be interesting. Let's try it out. And I found a team with what would go on to be almost a defining team of mine of Whimsicott, Kyogre, Zacian, and Amoonguss. At the time, it had Zapdos and the Dark Urshifu on it, and I was like, this looks like a team that fits how I like to play the game. Let's try it. And I got in touch with the Japanese player, and he told me that one of my good friends, Calvin Foster, had also asked him for the team separately. So we started working on it for a bit, and we get to Liverpool, and thankfully, out of nowhere, I go 8-0 in Swiss, and then unfortunately losing top eight. But I was really happy with how the tournament had gone, and I really wanted to push on from there. So 4 weeks after that, at EUIC 2022, I used a very similar team and finished top 16 there. And this was my first day two at an event. Then there was a few months I'd decided to go to NAIC at this point. I went to a few tournaments, Lille 2022, as you mentioned, where we first met. That was one of them. They all went just fine, but I was learning about the team a lot. And then fast forwards to NAIC of that year, and once again, I think as a culmination of all of the time and effort I'd put into the team throughout the season, I'm finished top eight of that event. And that really feels like one of the results I'm most proud of. Taking a team from 3 or 4 months prior, working on it, going to a lot of events, and refining it to how I like to play, and coming out with a result that I think showed that. So I think overall that season was really important for me to show that, you know, I can compete at that level in person, and that it wasn't just, you know, an online kind of matter. The World Championships that year unfortunately didn't go as planned. I qualified for day 2 automatically and then went 3-4. So, yeah, it was okay. I was in London. Something I've noticed is that the XL as a venue has been one of my consistently worst performing tournaments in general. Annoying giving it so close to me. But I was overall super happy with how the season had gone. And yes, really glad to show that coming out of the pandemic, I had actually made use of it and really trained, and now was competing with the best players in Europe and the world, actually.
Yeah. Who knows, though? I mean, yes, Excel is sort of on your doorstep, but maybe it's just the act of going abroad that focuses your mind in a different way, you know?
Yeah.
It's interesting question that raises. And yeah, I mean, a slew of really good finishes that season.
The top 8 at NAIC, I think, was
yeah,
my proudest result. But I honestly feel like the Liverpool finish I had in March of that year is not far off. The fact that I was able to go undefeated in Swiss, unfortunately not take it all the way, but I really felt like I could, and I think the nerves got the better of me in the Top Cup. And that's fine. I was able to look back on it and learn from it. But yeah, I think just it still comes up as one of my favorite results because of being able to show out of the pandemic that I was able to compete at that level.
Yeah, but then again, the having a top 16 finish at the European International Championships and then top 8 at the North American International Championships. The international championships in particular, world-class trainers going along. And so the competition is absolutely stacked. So to come out with those results in the same season, incredible. But then, yes, again, you say Worlds that year didn't go your way, but at the end of the day, Worlds is just another tournament, and the tournaments that you did compete in and got fantastic results, those were the ones that went your way. So, and it sounds like your training over the pandemic really did pay off. Now we want the payoff of the 5th Pokemon on your dream team.
It's Among Us. As far as competitive Pokemon goes, I think it's the best Pokemon ever created. In terms of what it can do and the presence it has on the field at any given time. And it's a Pokemon I always go back to as a staple on a lot of my teams. And yeah, in that 2022 season, it was one of the 4 Pokemon that stuck on my team the whole way throughout every tournament. Funnily enough, it's one of the Pokemon I like its shiny form more than its regular one. But yeah, I think it's just one of the best Pokemon. It is the best Pokemon, in my opinion, in VGC history. And yeah, it's on my dream team because of that.
Among Us is shiny form, for anyone not aware. Among Us itself has that Pokeball cap to it, but then it's shiny form. Exactly, yeah. Thank you very much. It's shiny form. That red bit is blue,
goes purple.
So it's more bluey indigo.
Yeah.
So it's more sort of Great Ball-ish variant of
roughly
that Pokeball design.
Mix between Great Ball and Master Ball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's really interesting about that is that you've said a couple of times now over the course of our conversation that your playstyle tends to be pretty fast, catch your opponent off guard, try and sweep before they have time to sort of get their thoughts together. But Among Us is the opposite of that, really slows the game state down.
Yeah.
But it speaks to how you need multiple strategies on one team.
Yeah. I think that Among Us is, it's one of those Pokemon that really does slow a game down, but that doesn't mean it can't be used in a very aggressive way in terms of, putting it next to a partner Pokemon like in 2022 Kyogre, where you can just keep using Water Spout and Origin Pulse and these really strong moves and have Among Us just protect the partner by Rage Powdering and redirecting all of the attacks from it. And also Spore as well, a guaranteed sleep move. It's easy to play really aggressively with Among Us and just put pressure on the opponent by threatening them with a Spore and putting them to sleep. So it can really slow the game down, but it is still valuable in those offensive kind of modes and game plans that you might have.
And of course, the rain set up by Koga as well is going to mitigate the fire weakness that Among Us has, being a part grass type. So yeah, really, really nice energy there. It's fascinating to hear you think it is the best Pokemon ever discovered in the competitive scene. I mean, for all the reasons you said, and there are all sorts of contenders for that, but it's interesting to hear you flying the flag for Among Us over something like, say, Incineroar, which of course is ubiquitous.
Incineroar is probably the main contender. One of my friends thinks Landorus Therian is the best, and we get into arguments all the time over it and make fun of each other because of it. But it's definitely Among Us.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. So that is Among Us joining your dream team. And before we round out your dream team, Taran, let's move on to getting towards the present more now with the 2023 Perth Regionals and then your most recent NAIC 2024 finish.
Yeah, so I think after the World Championships that year, in 2022, we took a bit of a break and then started again in 2023 with Scarlet and Violet. I had started off, reasonably well. I unfortunately finished 33rd place at Liverpool that year, when the top cut was 32 people. But then because of my performance at the North American International Championships the year before, I had got a travel awards to Australia for the Oceania International Championships. And so I went there. I made day 2 there as well. And there was a regional championships in Perth 2 weeks later. So I decided to just make a trip out of it. I was in Australia. I was going to go and sightsee, and got to Perth, and I had a different team to the one I'd used at in the Oceania International Championships, and managed to win it. I couldn't quite believe it myself. It was a smaller tournament in a year of quite big tournaments. I think 2023 was the year where we really started to get, very large in-person tournaments and day 2 Swisses in VGC. This was still just 7 rounds on the first day and then a top 8 cut the next day. I remember going into the tournament thinking, I think this team is really good that I've got. It was quite different to what I normally use. It had Mousehold and Fluttermane as like the core of the team, being able to use Super Fang to like cut an opponent's health in half, and then have Follow Me and Friend Guard to protect Fluttermane, and then use Fluttermane to do the damage. And I get to tournament, I go 6-1 in Swiss round, so I go to top 8, and I get a game 1 win in my top 8 match because my opponent was late, unfortunately. But I was really nervous going into that top 8 match because I knew I had a matchup that I could win. It's 50-50-ish. But I was nervous because up until that point, I'd never won a match in Top Cut. So at Bochum in 2020, Liverpool in 2022, and NAIC, I'd lost in the first round of Top Cut. So once I was able to win that match, I then won my top 4, and then I made it to the final against Alistair Sandover, who was the undefeated player up until that point. And yes, somehow I managed to win, and that really sits as, my proudest result. And that on one weekend, everything came together, and I was able to win a regional championships.
Yeah. I mean, you said earlier that it's unfortunate that you don't play so well at the Excel because it's so near. You have to go halfway across the globe, Taran,
I know,
to get the absolutely top level results of winning. But it also goes to show how you, as you say, it just so happened that the Perth Regionals was 2 weeks after OCIC, and so clearly you were just in the right frame of mind So just go and
Yeah.
have fun and see what happens. You kind of have nothing to lose. You're having a fun holiday, and then you turn up to a tournament, see how it goes, and again comes back to the mental aspect of the game that we were talking about earlier. So it's really fascinating to hear about that. What, from your perspective, how much of a factor do you think that was?
I think it was really helpful in terms of going into the tournament. I didn't set myself high expectations. I kind of just wanted to secure my world's invite for that year, which would have required top 32. But I knew that the team could go make a deep run in the tournament, and so I wasn't worried about having a team in the few days leading up to it, and that really helped. Just going in and seeing what happens and trying my best. I think in these smaller tournaments, there's very little room for error, and so when I lost my round in Swiss, in a really close match, I started to get a bit nervous. But once I made it through the Swiss rounds, I once again felt comfortable going into Sunday, and I knew I could win the tournament. And I just, thankfully, I was able to play good enough Pokemon to win. And yeah, I think it's one of the big things was having a team that I was comfortable with and knew was quite good in advance of the tournament. Whereas some of my more recent results, I've been really sweating for a team leading up to it.
Yeah, having that foundation laid of being comfortable with the team you're using, so crucial. And great to have a little shout out to Mousehold there as well, which is my favorite Generation 9 Pokemon.
Oh, nice.
But now let's talk about, at the time of recording, your most recent result, which is at the North American International Championships 2024.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a last minute decision for me, really. After the European International Championships this year, where once again I'd put in hundreds of hours into practicing for it, and it once again just did not pan out the way I'd hoped. I'd qualified for the World Championships at that point, and I thought I'm just going to leave it there. I hadn't had an amazing season up until that point. I'd had a really good result in Lille, but then since my results just hadn't been up to the level I was hoping, so I thought, let's just take a bit of a break, come back for the World Championships and go from there. But then they announced Regulation G, where you can use a legendary Pokemon. And instantly I was like, I'm going to Stockholm. I really want to play. So I did. And it was fine. I was thankfully able to make day 2, but then not do so well in day 2. And after the tournament, I kind of was left a bit wanting. I wanted to play a bit more, but I hadn't, I was going to, if I wanted to go to NAIC, it was going to be out of my own pocket. And I was really thinking, this isn't a good decision. It's not wise for me to. It makes very little sense. But I kind of, once again, going back to making decisions you're not going to regret, I decided, right, I'm just going to go. I know I'll regret it if I don't. And we'll see how it goes. And so I started preparing. I booked my flights about 3 weeks before I flew out. And leading up to the tournament, I had been really trying to make Calyrex Shadow work with choice specs, and it just wasn't working. And that week before leading up to the tournament, I decided I can't use this. It's not going to work. I'm not comfortable with it enough. And so I had to find a new team. And I remember really struggling to find a team that I liked. Nothing seemed to work. I was really getting a bit stressed about it, thinking, is this going to be another tournament on top of, the kind of rough performances I'd had throughout the year? And then on the Wednesday before, while I was sat in my, hotel room, I went back to a team I'd used at Stockholm with choice specs Terrapagos and Fluttermane and Chi-Yu. And I added, Grimmsnarl with Reflect and Light Screen to kind of mitigate damage, which is quite the opposite to the kind of, offensive Tailwind, fast style of team I like. But I put it on and the team started to work a lot better. alongside Iron Hands, which was kind of rising in popularity at the time. So I decided, you know what, it's got a core of the team that I'm quite comfortable with. Funnily enough, still had a Mungus on it. And it feels like it's good enough into the rest of the formats that maybe I can make this work. And this is the closest I'm going to get to a team I feel comfortable with. So I kind of enlisted the help of a couple of my friends, one being Maurice Teg, who is a bit of a Grimmsnarl expert. I said, this is what I want to use. Help me just refine it as much as I can before the tournament. And then we get to NAIC. I make it through day one, just about. I felt like I played really well throughout the whole day. And then I was on stream in round 9 against Victor Medina, who is an incredible player. And we went the distance, almost taking an hour to play. But I was able to do it. I felt, absolutely over the moon with it. And then in day 2, actually, it kept on going. I won my first 3 matches, and I was 10-2 at one point. I'd actually played them against Justin Tang. That set also went for an hour. So both the sets were the complete opposite of the game I like to play. But I won, and then at that point, things started to take a little bit of a downturn. I lost to Shilian Tang, who finished top 8 of the event. And then I faced the winner of NAIC, Patrick Connors, in a really close game that came down to the very last turn of the match, where I missed the knockout on his Calyrex Ice because he had special, defense investment. He went on to win the tournament from that turn, and I thankfully was able to win my last round, funnily enough, against Hangyu Zhang, who's also been playing under the UK flag this year and is the number 1 in points for the UK, but I was able to win. So I finished 19th place out of about 900 people. So that really felt like a turning point on what had been a really quite average season for me. I finally had a really great result that I could look at and say, yeah, I felt like I played really well the whole weekend, and I'm super happy with it.
And yeah, it goes to show as well that sometimes the stars don't align as perfectly as they did for your Perth win, and you didn't have the team quite as early on as you would have liked, but you still you keep your head in the game, and you know that the team you have has potential, and sometimes that's just got to be enough, and then you try and do the best with it that you can. The the stream game was a real marathon there. You've been on stream quite a few times by this point. How different is it for you, or does it now, because you've been on stream quite a few times, does it feel relatively similar to you by this point, or what are your thoughts around that?
So something I've come to realize about myself is that I think my level of play is thankfully at a reasonably high level, but it doesn't change much. I'm able to perform at just as well as against really incredible players as I am against players that they may be a little newer to the scene. I kind of just have a level baseline, and I think that translates to my streamed games as well. I think something like 9 wins and 1 loss on stream since 2022, and I think a lot of that is because while I get very nervous in games, I think I get nervous all the time when playing. I feel like the pressure doesn't really affect me very much, and I just keep at that same base level that is able to get me through a lot of matches, and that being on the stage with the bright lights and the cameras on you, I find doesn't really change how I play. Thankfully, I know a lot of people can get quite nervous on streams just by being on the stage, but thankfully that doesn't change how I play, and it doesn't make much of a difference to me. And that's, I think, part of why I'm able to still have quite a good record on streams, actually.
Sometimes it's just all about getting used to it. And as you say, you said that the very first time you made Top Cart, you were that much more nervous, and now you're a little bit more used to it. Maybe took a couple of top cut appearances before you're able to go further than that. So sometimes it's just a question of getting used to new places that you find yourself in. Be that being on stream or in a later stage of the tournament. But now, Taran, it's time to round out this dream team. So who's going to be here joining Rayquaza, Aaron, Marshadow, Togekiss, and Amoonguss?
This is my favourite Pokemon in general. Mudkip, as I may have alluded to earlier. Yes, I love the way it looks. In fact, this is actually my first ever plush of a Pokemon. And I used to take it to events with me until I started running out of space in my bag. I don't know. I just something about it. It looks so cute, doesn't it? And now whenever I play Pokemon Emeralds, I always start with Mudkip just because I love it so much. While I was playing Pokemon Emerald when I was younger, I kind of flitted between a lot of them, would use Trico a lot, but Mudkip's always the one I'd go back to. So yes, my favourite Pokemon ever.
Of course, rounding out the trio there is Torchic, and I guess you've played through the game a few times with each of those first partner Pokemon, but Mudkip that just for whatever reason speaks to you the most. And I mean, I can sort of come to my own conclusions as to why Mudkip is your favourite of all time. You know, with Emerald being your first ever Pokemon game, and you had time having started so many new games, exploring each of the first partner Pokemon to realise that Mudkip was your favourite. But is there more to it than that, even?
I think it might be a lot of nostalgia, but I kind of really like cute looking Pokemon. If I bring them up, these two definitely fit that bill. But I feel like it is a lot of nostalgia that's really brought it to the forefront. And as you see, like, half of my list is from Generation 3.
And otherwise you have Generations 7, 4, and 5 on there too.
Yes.
So yeah, pretty good range. But now, Taran, so you've got your dream team of Rayquaza, Aaron, Marshadow, Togekiss, Amoonguss, and Mudkip. And now, time to ask you, which of these are you going to choose to be your partner Pokemon?
So, giving it a bit of thought, I think it's got to be Rayquaza. Got to be. I think it's the most menacing. If I'm stood there with my partner Pokemon by my side, Rayquaza is the one that's going to strike fear into the hearts of everyone. And it's green as well. Let's not forget.
True.
So, yes, it's got to be Rayquaza. Maybe a little difficult to catch if I have to, but yes, it's got to be Rayquaza.
Slightly surprised that it wasn't Mudkip there. It depends how you're defining what you want out of a...
I think so, yeah. Like I would have Mudkip in my team of Pokemon, but if I'm stood there with a partner Pokemon by my side, I want it to look, look menacing. Mudkip, unfortunately, it's too cute to do that, so
but
doesn't quite work.
That's something that Mudkip has that Rayquaza does not have. And with slightly different spelling, Aaron is just Taran without a T. So
well, yes, true. I don't know how you're supposed to say Aaron properly, but saying it like Aaron, it does sound like Taran. So
yeah, it's Aron rather than the A that you have there before the end. But still, okay. So Rayquaza is going to be your partner Pokemon, and now going on from there, I want to ask you, and I know that you've been debating this question a lot yourself. If you're a Pokemon, what would you be? And let's get your thoughts on that first.
So yeah, I was really struggling to think about what Pokemon I'd be, but I guess a couple of my rough thoughts were, I feel like it would be a fighting type, potentially, because of my mindset when playing the game, and just in general, I like to go aggressive, be quite headstrong, but also maybe like a psychic type. So roughly, being quite, even through all of that, aggressiveness, being still quite considered, and once again, really thinking a lot about my decision making in Pokemon and in real life. Now, there aren't many Pokemon that fit the bill, but the two that I noticed were Grumpig and Medicham. And I feel like of the two, I'm probably closer to a Grumpig. And I say that because I do love food. So I guess I'd have to go Grumpig. Is Grumpig even a fighting type? I'm not sure.
No,
But
it's not.
it looks like a fighting type.
I see.
So we'll go with
pure
that.
psychic. Pure psychic. Grumpig.
Interesting.
But
yeah.
This is really interesting because, as I said to you before we started recording, I would sort of muse over the course of the discussion as to what type I think you would be. And I also came to the conclusion of psychic. And as you were talking about fighter, I could see that too. So I was about to suggest to you Medicham.
Yeah,
so it's
Medicham was one of them.
Interesting that it came down to those two for you. From you, of course, know yourself best. From my perspective, I saw you more as a Medicham, but yeah, I can definitely see both. But it's interesting that we were both on that psychic.
I guess realizing that Grumpig is not actually a fighting type probably leans in more towards a Medicham, I guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Definitely one of the two.
Well, there you go. Fascinating. What do you all think? Do you agree that Taran would be a Medicham or a Grumpig, or do you think we're completely off the mark? Do you think it would be a different type? Let us know in the comments. I know that Taran would be especially fascinated to hear, as would I,
absolutely,
to see
yeah.
what Pokemon or just type you think that Taran would be. And speaking of you all, it's time for the questions from the community for Taran. So I posted online, as I always do, asking for questions for Taran, and thank you so much for submitting some fantastic questions here. I apologize as ever if I mispronounce any of your names or handles. So first of all, we're going to go with this question from Scotty W0101. Now, the question that Scotty's asked is, what do you feel was the turning point for you from a good competitive Pokemon player to one of the best in EU and perhaps the world? You've sort of answered that by talking about your experiences of the pandemic. If you were to pin it down to one particular, could be a tournament, or it could be a decision you made, or a tweak you made to a team, or anything like that. You can define it however broadly you want. What do you think was the very specific turning point for you?
I think the turning point I'd have to say was the start of Sword and Shield. So I kind of took it as like a complete reset. Everyone was learning about a completely new mechanic, Dynamax at the time. And I said to myself, right, the way I'm going to bridge that gap in skill at the time was by really learning the mechanic deeply and getting to grips with it. And finding out as well, kind of my play style. So I know a lot of people don't believe in play styles and feel like you should be able to play any team well. And I feel like that's true to an extent. But I think that everyone has the kind of team and style of team that they can do really well and matches, I guess, their brain really and how their brain thinks. Mine leans itself towards more aggressive teams, I feel. It's something that I can do well. And what it means is that any gap in skill between me and my opponent, I can bridge by using a team that I am totally comfortable with. And even if the Pokemon are slightly different, I can make adjustments to teams that still match that style of play. And that means it's quite intuitive to me. So I think, that was kind of where I started. And then, yes, as we got into the pandemic, I was able to learn a lot more deeply about the mechanic of Dynamax and really do a lot of thinking about the kind of teams I like to use in a relatively stress-free environment, being it online. And that was really the turning point, I feel, Sword and Shield starting really. And I think it showed as well. At the first tournament in Sword and Shield in Bochum, I was able to top cut it because I'd learned deeply about the mechanic, learned about how I like to play the game. And I feel like that I would recommend that to anyone we're in the middle of a generation at this point, but trying to find the type of team that you like to use and maybe look at past tournament results and say, okay, this tournament went well. What was I using there? And maybe try and find similarities. And then once we get to a new generation, there will come a new mechanic and really taking the time to learn about that, it will, the more effort you put in, especially at the start of a generation or a regulation or a format, really, it will show. And you'll find you're having better results at the start of a format where you can bridge that any gaps in skill with effort, and then you can build on from that, really.
Very well summarized. That's really useful advice. Thank you so much for that, Taran, and thank you for that question, Scotty. And now moving on to a sort of nexus of similar questions here from iMac404, Paul J. Spear, and Josh Low2. And they are respectively: what's your favorite Pokemon to team build with? What is your favorite Pokemon to use competitively, and why is it Amoonguss? And why is Amoonguss the greatest of all time? So it might be, maybe your favorite Pokemon to team build with is not Amoonguss, but more of a deep dive into Amoonguss, if that is your answer there.
Okay, yes, that is I personally by far the best competitive Pokemon throughout every generation it's been allowed since Gen 5. I think, yeah, Amoonguss is one of those Pokemon that's like really unique in its toolkit, in that it's super slow, so it's in the past been a really good counter to Trick Room, which reverses the speeds, and can really punish a lot of those faster teams. So Spore, it's guaranteed, it's 100% accuracy, guaranteed to put a Pokemon to sleep. Rage Powder, being able to redirect damage from really powerful threats, and even now, it got a bit of a buff in Pollen Puff, which can attack if you target an opponent, but also can heal a partner Pokemon. And so I think just the amount of control it exerts when it's on the field is, quite frankly, unmatched. I think Incineroar is the only other Pokemon that could come close to it. And I think we see how much control Amoonguss shows in team building as well. Incineroar's always a lot of the time run safety goggles. We see Terra Grass to get around Rage Powder and Spore. We see a lot of grass types to kind of answer Amoonguss. And I think that's just a testament to how good it is, and the fact that it can really fit on any kind of team. It will always be able to do something for a team. And that's why it's always one of my main considerations when I look to building teams is, does Amoonguss fit? If no, why not? And if it does, it's straight on the team.
Yeah, wow. Such a crucial Pokemon for you there. And I know in my own team building, because I also tend to prefer / have more fun with the faster, more offensive teams. If I've got 5 Pokemon decided, the 6th will probably just be, they'll slap an Amoonguss on there, it'll probably be good.
Yeah, exactly. There are not many Pokemon that you can do that with. Incineroar and Amoonguss are realistically the 2 best Pokemon for that. But I think Amoonguss is better in terms of being quite slow as well, and being able to slow down games a lot more than Incineroar can, and be able to really support fast and slow modes of teams.
Well, thank you for that answer, Taran, and thank you for those questions. I'm at 404, Paul J. Spear, and Josh Low2. Finally, question from good friend of ours and fellow caster, David Partington, David Part VGC. If a future Perth Regional were announced, would you go and defend your title?
So there was a Perth Regional a few months ago, actually. And I remember at the start of the season, when they announced that the prize money for tournaments was going to be increased, I seriously considered going to the Perth Regional this year and trying to defend my title, I guess. I decided against it because there wasn't an Oceania International Championships, unfortunately. But I would love to go back and play in Australia again. I have a lot of really good friends there that I don't get to see very often because we are on opposite ends of the world. So it is a very real consideration for me. If there's a Perth Regional in 2025, you may see me there. It is a much higher probability than 0 at the moment.
Yeah, and as we've discovered, the further you go away from home, the better you tend to play Pokemon.
Clearly,
So,
yeah.
who knows? Who knows? Well, thank you, Taran, and thank you for that question, David, and thank you for all of your questions there. If you'd like to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, then you can find me on X at Chazingdra and the dedicated podcast account at Chazingdra Chats, which is where I post asking for questions from you all. I'd love to hear what you would all love to hear. All right, then, Taran. So we've heard a lot about you up to now, but the next question is, what's next for you?
I think in general, I'm enjoying where I work. I'm quite happy with where my life is at the moment. My next step is really trying to find a property to move into. I live in London and I want to keep living in London. So it is very expensive, but I'm fortunate enough that I can live at home and I'm able to save a lot of money and actually have Pokemon almost fund itself in terms of the prize pools and stuff. So that's probably my next step. In terms of Pokemon, I think the World Championships is coming up soon. I still need to find a team for that. I probably won't until the week before the event. That's fine. I've kind of accepted it at this point. And then next year, I always go into seasons just thinking, let's qualify for Worlds. That's always my aim. That's not going to change. If results go better than that and I find myself competing for potential travel awards and stuff, great. If not, I just want to, go to events because I really love playing the game and see how they go. I don't plan on stopping playing anytime soon.
Yes, of course, the World Championships that are coming up this year in 2024 in Honolulu, Hawaii. We'll have to see how those go for Taran. And I think deciding on a team, a week or so in advance of a competition, I know that I personally, I will work better to a deadline. And I think sometimes it's the best thing to focus the mind and it makes you really focus on what's important, what's the best for your play style and what you value the most. So it's probably could well be a wise thing to just keep experimenting for now and then much sooner before Worlds thinking, okay, what of all the things I've tried is sticking with me the best? Is that how you tend to build teams and experiment?
Yeah, roughly is. I I experiment a lot. I'm not a very good team builder, so I kind of just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Usually not very much. But I'm kind of the mindset that I will have to use 6 Pokemon at the World Championships. So that will eventually happen. So I will have a team at some point.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of just accepting of the fact that it might be very close to the World Championships before I finally decide on something. But I will have to at some point.
You say you're not a very good team builder, but also, I mean, clearly you've had some incredible results. So I think probably you're doing yourself a disservice there. But anyway, we'll see what you end up bringing to the World Championships. And so finally, Taran, looking back from now as a competitive video game player of such standing, all the way back to Taran, who had that copy of Pokemon Emerald, what advice would you give to that younger version of you?
I think it's the kind of lesson that I learned a lot later in my life than I wish I had, of making every decision and living your life in such a way that you just don't regret anything looking back on it. I think regardless of the decisions you make, whether they're good or bad ones, as long as you can kind of have a reason as to why you did it and be content with the decision regardless of the outcome, you can, that will go a long way to, I think, living a healthy life and a life you're happy with.
You can't change the past, and that's very sage advice indeed from you there, Taran. So thank you for that. And the chat does not, in fact, end there, because we'll very shortly be getting into Taran's Rapidash round quick fire bonus questions that Taran has not prepared for. So if you want to have a listen to what Taran's going to be saying there, then you can join us over on Patreon. Questions like, who's a player that Taran looks up to? Or what's the best underrated item in Pokemon VG? You can join us over on Patreon if you want to hear and support me and the podcast. But of course, I very much appreciate you listening to this episode regardless. So would love to see you over there if you can make it, but no worries at all if you can't. And Taran, thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been a really interesting insight into the mind of such a decorated Pokemon video game player. So thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No, of course, absolutely. A pleasure to talk to you. And where can people find you online if they want to catch up with you?
Mainly on X, so at Ororayquaza. My account is privated, but my DMs are always open. But I would also say, if you ever see me at an event, just come up and say hi. As I mentioned earlier, we all love Pokemon, so I'm always happy to chat. So yes, they're the ways to get a hold of me.
Absolutely. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, if you enjoy the show, you know what's coming, then make sure you like and subscribe on my YouTube channel. If you're listening over on Spotify or an audio or another audio app, then you can hop over to YouTube and like and subscribe there, because all these things really do go a long way. Drop a comment as well, because Taran's given us so much food for thought. Would love to know your own thoughts on what Taran's shared, what your own dream team of 6 Pokemon would be. Would be fascinated to read that too. And as I mentioned earlier, my X account at Chazingdra. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok. You can keep up with everything I'm doing there, be it content creation or casting or anything beyond that as well. Would love to see you over there. Also, any feedback that you have on the show, you can email chazingdra@gmail.com and help spread the word about the show, because I have a huge range of guests from competitive to casual and beyond. You can use the hashtag ChazingdraChats and the hashtag 6Pokemon. One life story. The sky's the limit in terms of the guests that I have on, and hopefully the people that can get something out of listening to and watching the show. Make sure you're tuning in next week, because I have the pleasure of being joined by Pokemon Unite caster Kirk Dubay, or Doob Snacks. Very much looking forward to talking to Kirk there. Someone who always brings such incredible energy to any of the Pokemon Unite streams. Taran, do you play any Pokemon Unite yourself?
I tried it when the game first came out, but my reaction times are nowhere near good enough to play it, so I'll stick to the video game, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, if you want to have a little taster as to what Pokemon Unite is all about, make sure you're tuning into my interview with Kirk next week. Episodes drop every Wednesday. All right then, Taran, it's time for your Rapidash round. So if you're not joining us over on Patreon for that, then it's goodbye from Taran.
Hey, see you later.
And it's a goodbye from me. See you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon, one life story. All right, Taran, how are you feeling about these bonus questions?
Nervous. A little nervous, but we'll see. We'll see.
Let's get into it. So